Hi, Eric here. I passed my check ride. I have my shiny license in hand. The check ride was shorter than I expected. It was the oral portion was about a little over an hour, including 2 bathroom breaks for the DPE. The flight portion was 1.1 hops time, so it was probably about 40 minutes in the air. We started at 7 o'clock and we were done and back in the office printing out my temporary license by 10 o'clock. So definitely was shorter than I expected. Fairly straightforward. But I did, after I got back, write down everything I could remember in a Google Doc from the check ride. I took a lot of notes and I came up with some tips if you're preparing for your check ride, maybe some things that might be helpful. So first of all, I would say schedule early. When I scheduled, all the DPEs were scheduled out about 8 weeks, and my initial schedule was 8 weeks out. I did tell the DPE, hey, I'm ready. So he said if he got a cancellation, and he could fit me in sooner, he would. And a few days later, he contacted me, said he had a cancellation, and I actually got my check ride in about 3 weeks. But definitely schedule in advance. If you think you're going to be ready, I would say definitely schedule it. Second, ditch the paper. I bought this paper for AIM and charts and stuff, and I'd heard that some DPEs like paper rather than electronics, but I contacted my DPE in advance to ask him some questions about planning the flight that he'd asked me to plan, and I asked him how he felt about electronics versus paper and Foreflight. He said he loves Foreflight, he uses it all the time, and electronics is fine. So I actually got a copy of the FAR AIM in the Kindle app on my iPad. I find it easier to read. I also used Foreflight to do the flight plan for the check ride and also to do the weight and balance. You do need to know, what goes into the calculations, and your DPE is likely to ask you, if you use electronics to say, hey, how is this calculation done and that sort of thing. If you know the answer, then it's perfectly fine to go with the electronics. Definitely prepare for the oral portion. I think the oral portion kind of sets the stage for the flight portion. And if you're well prepared for the oral portion of the check ride, it kind of solidifies in the DPE's mind that you've prepared for this and you're ready. The DPE does have some judgment in terms of, you can get things wrong. I got some things wrong on the oral portion. We went over those after the oral portion was done. I wasn't 100% in spec on the flight, and it's, up to the DPE's judgment. And so if you're prepared for the oral portion and he finds that you're well prepared, that kind of just is like the first step towards a successful check ride. I used this book here from ASA called Private Pilot Oral Exam Guide. For a couple weeks before my check ride, every day I would go through, worked my way cover to cover, and then went back and reviewed some of the sections that I thought were most important. I found this to be really good preparation for the oral portion. I'll put a link in the description so you can go find it. Make a binder. I saw this several other places and I did it, and I do think it was helpful. And again, I think it helped really make it go smoothly. Here's the binder that I used. Okay, this isn't showing up on camera very well, so I'll just describe it. So I've got the IACRA form here all filled out. That's the first thing he's going to need. I put my name and FTN number at the top. Again, that's the first thing he's going to ask for. I had the 8710 report printed out from Foreflight. He's going to need that. I had a copy of my not the written test results here for him, so he could see that. I printed out from Foreflight the private pilot report, so it showed every requirement. It showed how I met that for my cross country. It listed out the flight plan, etc. I had my actual flight plan printed out here for the flight that he asked me to prepare. I also had the full printout of the briefing out of Foreflight. I had a printout of the sectional with the flight plan on it as well. I made photocopies of the airworthiness certificate and the registration of the plane we were going to use that day. I did a printout of a prog chart, had a printout of the weight and balance that I did, and then I had printouts of the airport diagrams for the 2 airports on the flight plan, as well as the supplemental pages for the 2 airports that were part of my flight plan. Putting it all in a binder like this, just, these are the things he's going to ask for. If you got him in the binder, he asks for them, you flip to the page, you just have them right there, and it makes things go really smoothly during the oral portion. So I definitely recommend making a binder. Do the little things well, and this applies to things like when you're starting the engine. Make sure that the engine doesn't over rev and the RPMs get too high. When you're taxiing, make sure you follow the taxi lines. I mean, again, like with the oral portion, if you do those little things, then it's just going to solidify in the DPE's mind. You're doing the little things right, you're probably going to be doing the big things right too. Taking the checklist with you when you do the pre-flight inspection of the plane, doing the checklist appropriately when you're on the flight. Again, one of the primary things the DPE is going to be looking for is, will you be a safe pilot? And these are the kind of things that just reinforce with him that you are going to be safe. Look over your shoulder. So during the check ride, he's going to give you an emergency situation. Most likely, he's going to give you an engine out. On one of my mock check rides that I did several mock check rides with different instructors from my flight school, including the chief instructor. And when I went out with the chief instructor, at one point he pulled the throttle back to idle. He said, "Your engine's out." I said, "Hey, I'm going to go for that road right there in front of us," and there were some power lines and things, and it really wasn't ideal. He said, "Hey, look over your left shoulder," and I did. And Kelly Air Park was right behind us, which is a private community that has a paved airstrip. So right over my shoulder was a paved runway that I could have used. So on the check ride, something very similar happened. He said, "Engine out." I immediately looked all around, including back over my left shoulder, and there was a grass airstrip right behind us over my left shoulder. I said, "Hey, I'm going to go for that airstrip." Turn the plane around, headed towards the airstrip. He said, "Yeah, I think you're going to make that. We're good." So definitely when you get the emergency, don't forget to look over your shoulder. Don't just look in front of you, because, he might set it up so that there's the perfect spot to bring the plane down right over your left shoulder. And finally, follow the DPE's lead. My DPE was great. He was very friendly. We talked about a lot of stuff, but he also, set up the check ride to get through the standards. Like, there's a list in the ACS of what you have to do, and he knows his job is to make sure that you do all the stuff that you have to do. But he can also be helpful in other ways. Like, he set up the radios for me. He did radio calls when we were in the practice area. Turns that he had me do during the check ride, I knew he was having me do those turns because they would be clearing turns. So, follow the lead of the DPE, and if you did well on the oral portion and you started out on the right foot, you did the little things well in the beginning part of the flight, and it's going to be in his mind that you're prepared, you know what you're doing, and you're going to be a safe pilot. And I think things will go really smoothly for you. So just a few tips, things, these are really like my feeling about what happened on the check ride. Definitely check with your DPE. I would recommend contacting him in advance of the check ride to ask him certain things, like, about the flight he has you plan, as well as how he feels about electronics and Foreflight and those things. I was a nervous wreck for at least several days before my check ride, trying to study the book that I showed you and everything else. But the actual check ride itself took much less time than I anticipated, and was actually fairly straightforward. And the DPE was great, and it was actually fun. So if you're about to take your check ride, good luck. I hope it goes smoothly for you. I will be posting more videos soon of flights I'm doing solo, as well as some with friends and family.